Welcome back, everybody. We're breaking down UFC 272, Covington versus Masvidal. And this card is low-key pretty stacked despite not having any title fights. Obviously we have the main event here. Two guys who I think are pretty big draws. So I think it's well warranted that this is a pay-per-view. And then we have RDA Fiziev. Technically should have been free, but, still a very fun fight, very exciting fight to have on the card. Barboza, Michał, Holland, Oliveira, even Spivak Hardy, I think is a low-key pretty fun fight. And then, of course, on the prelims, we have, Jalin Turner and Jamie Mullarkey should be a fun fight. Marina Rodriguez, Xiaonan should be another fun one. And then looking a little further down the card, Moroz versus Agapova should be another exciting banger as well. And then we got a couple prospects and Umar, Nurmagomedov, and Tagir also fighting as well. So, a very fun card all around. I think this should be a very exciting card. Really looking forward to it. But we got to move along here, keep this podcast rolling. And, I did say last week I was going to do the recap separately, but I think I'm just going to keep it all in this one video. Keep it a little more condensed. I'll try and get through it super quickly here so we could get right into the breakdowns. Betting-wise, had a pretty solid night, just a bit under 5 units on the night. Could have been a lot better if the Rodriguez and Petrosyan fight did not go the distance, but it is what it is. So recapping the card real quick, we had Altamirano, Hernandez. It was a pretty close fight. I did have Hernandez edging it out, but probably shouldn't have laid the slight juice on him, considering how close it played out. But moving along, Ramiz Brahimaj, Michael Gilmore. So, just the easiest spot on the card. Took Brahimaj by submission and round 1 submission. That's basically how the guy wins. And he's going up against Gilmore, who has, zero submission defense. Super square play, but that cashed, very easily. Alejandro Perez, Jonathan Martinez, ended up parlaying Martinez. It did get a little dicey early. We saw the chin of Martinez get cracked, and that is a concern for him, but he was able to fight through it. And at the end of the day, Perez is just not really that guy. So moving along, Terrence McKinney for ZM. I think I only took McKinney to win via round 1. Took a small poke on it because, that's generally how McKinney wins. So not a super sharp take, pretty square there, but it ended up cashing. He ended up getting it done. Moving along, Josiane Nunez, Ramona Pascal ended up passing on this fight. Just did not have faith really in Pascal here. And, Josiane going to be going up against a much bigger fighter. Didn't know how that was going to turn out, so ended up passing. So moving along, Zurong, Ignacio Bahamondes ended up taking Bahamondes here. I just felt the cardio and the output would win him the fight, and it did. Ended up getting the late finish. I will say this, though. Zurong looked very good when he was moving forward. It's just that he didn't do it enough. Not sure why. I don't know if it's the cardio or the fact that he didn't really like getting hit in there, but, he looked good at the beginning of that second round when he was pressuring, but kind of fell apart, when Bahamondes was starting to turn it up on him. So moving along, Armen Petrosyan, Gregory Rodriguez. I think this was the fight I probably had the most staked on. I was on the Petrosyan money line side. I took him by knockout. Also took him to win in round 1. Round 1 knockout. Took the under. Fight does not go the distance as well. Had that parlayed up. I really thought the striking and the aggression of Petrosyan would be enough to get Rodriguez out of there. If not, we see Rodriguez be able to land some heavy shots, potentially get the submission as well. So really unfortunate that didn't cash. Honestly, got kind of lucky on the Petrosyan money line side. I personally scored it Rodriguez round 2, round 3. I guess I can kind of see how you could score maybe the second round for Petrosyan, but not really. I mean, this was like a borderline robbery here, but not even the worst decision on the card. We'll get to that later. But overall, it was still a very fun fight. Would have had just a massive winning night if Petrosyan had just gotten the knockout. But we move along. Arman Tsarukyan, Joel Alvarez. I had Tsarukyan parlayed up, but, the other leg of the parlay didn't cash. Should have just taken Tsarukyan to win inside the distance, honestly. I took a small poke on Tsarukyan round 3. I know Joel was getting a lot of love throughout the week. I could see why, but at the end of the day, the guy's just a bottom player. Like, the guy just is way too comfortable off his back. And, against lower level guys, you could pull it off. Guys like fucking Beluardo and the other fucking bald guy's name, you could pull off a submission from your guard. But against a high level wrestler and grappler like Tsarukyan, that's just a way too low of a percentage move. And on top of that, you're giving away a pretty dominant position against a very high level wrestler and grappler like Tsarukyan. So I did like Tsarukyan to win inside the distance. I thought that, it happened maybe later in the fight. We see Alvarez start to take a little too much damage on bottom, but, that cut fucked him up early, and, I think that cascaded pretty quickly into a second round finish. But, at the end of the day, Alvarez has a ton of early finishes, hasn't shown what he'd look like, if he got extended. And I did like the aggression and the pressure that Tsarukyan is able to put all 3 rounds. Really sad I wasn't able to actually cash on it, but we move along. Jiyeon Kim, Priscilla Cachoeira, and definitely a robbery here in my opinion. And if you guys listen to my podcast enough, you know that I really don't throw that word around all that much. Most of the time, I can kind of see why, judges would score it one way or the other. Especially in close fights, I am not too upset about it being scored, either way. But, this was, I think, a pretty egregious one. I had Kim winning the first and the second round. But regardless, I would not have laid the juice on Kim here just because of how hittable she is. And, that third round was super dicey anyways. The way she was just eating those elbows from Cachoeira. But, yeah, like I was saying, Kim's going to be able to fight close a lot of the time just because of how hittable she is, just how defensively lax she is. And I did end up playing the fight goes the distance. Definitely had me sweating in like that final minute, but both girls very tough, was able to gut it out. But we move along. Misha Serkinov, Wellington Turman, and I did have a play on the Serkinov side. And it looked like he could have had it in the bag early, but the guy just choked. Serkinov, definitely one of these guys who I've said are kind of unreliable, and Turman was able to catch him. Very slick armbar there. Good on him for getting it, but a massive choke job on Serkinov's side. And then lastly, Islam Makhachev versus Bobby Green. I took Makhachev to win inside the distance, had that parlayed up. Honestly, just did not think that Green would be able to last 5 rounds in there against Makhachev. And no disrespect to Green, but, coming in short notice against an absolute beast like Makhachev, I really didn't see it happening. And, I didn't think it happened that early, but I can't say I'm really all that surprised because at the end of the day, Green is coming in short notice, and Green is a bit of an older fighter. But, Makhachev was able to get it done there, was able to cash relatively easily. Hope they give Makhachev the title shot next. It's probably going to be him versus Oliveira. That should be a much more compelling matchup. But if it's Gaethje, you can go ahead and just max bet Makhachev in that spot. Just drop the hammer on him, parlay him up. Because I think Makhachev runs through Gaethje, no problem. But yeah, that'll do it for this recap. Quickest recap of all time. Let's get into UFC 272. And kicking off the card, we have Dustin Jacoby versus Michał Oleksiejczuk, and Jacoby's the minus 195 favorite. Come back on Oleksiejczuk is plus 170, and this should be a pretty fun fight between two strikers. We'll start with Jacoby first, who, he's primarily a kickboxer in there. He does a really good job of fighting at distance. He's got a good jab, 1-2, pretty good combination striking. The guy's got a really nice, diverse kicking game as well. Really likes to kick to the body and work the leg kicks also. He mainly fights out of the orthodox stance, but I actually do think he does a decent job of switching stances and fighting out of both stances moderately well. As offensive striking, I think, is a tad underrated. He's kind of been flying under the radar a little bit. He's not the most, flashy fighter in there, but it is pretty effective. But this should be a pretty fun fight because Oleksiejczuk is a pretty scrappy offensive striker as well. He's got good movement on the feet. Does a pretty good job of just bouncing in and out of the pocket. He likes to pressure opponents. Loves to rip to the body, and generally he's going to be the quicker guy in there. Much quicker than most light heavyweights. But of course, the issue with Oleksiejczuk is going to be the fact that he is pretty undersized for the division. I think the guy's more naturally a middleweight, possibly even a welterweight. He's not super big in there. He's not super cut up or anything, but he is quick and he does seem to pack a bit of a punch as well. We have seen him struggle a bit against guys who've been able to abuse the size advantage and go to the wrestling, guys like OSP and Jimmy Crute. And those are the fighters I think would give Oleksiejczuk just the most trouble in their guys who are able to just kind of bully him in grappling situations. But overall, Oleksiejczuk's done pretty well for himself. He's been matched up with a lot of just plotty light heavyweights like Roundtree, Volante, to an extent even Antigulov, and more recently Gamzatov, who honestly looked pretty gassed after the first minute. But these are pretty big kind of plotty light heavyweights who are a little slower than Oleksiejczuk, guys who are not exactly the most technical either. Guys who generally look to brawl, and Oleksiejczuk's had a lot of success in there against these guys, but I don't really think that Jacoby's really going to match that archetype. Jacoby brings a much wider and much better skill set to the table here. We did see Oleksiejczuk struggle a bit, with the footwork and the distance management of Bukauskas earlier, but he did end up winning that fight, but it was a very, very close fight, a fight that a lot of people thought Bukauskas won. So Jacoby, I think, brings a lot of the same tools to the table here, and I do think that Jacoby's just a better striker than someone like Bukauskas. So, I like Jacoby in the spot, actually. I like him quite a bit. I think the line's about right. I do think that Oleksiejczuk can make this a scrap and, keep himself in this fight, but I do think that over the course of 15 minutes, in what's most likely going to be a striking affair, we see Jacoby just land some of the better shots. He's much better at distance. He's going to be able to work the kicks, work the jab. And, I think we're going to see Oleksiejczuk struggle a bit closing the distance, because I think that every time he looks to get into the pocket, we'll see Jacoby just touch him up a little bit. And, Jacoby's going to have a much better time at distance, staying safe. Oleksiejczuk, he's eventually probably going to bite down, and we could see him give Jacoby some trouble when that happens. Jacoby, he has been rocked. He's been knocked out before. So, if Oleksiejczuk just puts the pressure on Jacoby, we could see Oleksiejczuk have some success there. But for the most part, I see Jacoby being able to maintain the distance and just be able to pick Oleksiejczuk apart and win a pretty competitive decision. Oleksiejczuk's not just going to roll over in there. He's going to bring the fight to Jacoby. But, there's only so many shots he could start eating when he enters the pocket before he looks to maybe slow down the pace a little more and be a little more reserved with the striking. So, I might favor Oleksiejczuk early. He's going to, start maybe aggressively, but as the fight gets, prolonged, he's going to have a little less power in there. We're going to start seeing the damage of Jacoby add up a bit, and we start to see Jacoby maybe pull away in the latter part of the second and the third round. So, yeah, I do believe, Oleksiejczuk's got a chance early, if he starts aggressively, but, I do think if Jacoby is able to weather that early storm, he should be able to take the second and third rounds. And, something that I didn't really even mention was potentially the grappling and the clinch work. Jacoby hasn't shown too much of it, but he has shown that he can, hit some offensive takedowns. And I do think that, if things get really dicey in there, he could potentially work that in, because Oleksiejczuk at the end of the day is going to be the much smaller fighter. If Jacoby decides to abuse his size a little bit, look to work in the clinch, really put his weight on Oleksiejczuk and really make him work there, it'll, I think, help take some of the steam off some of the shots that Oleksiejczuk's throwing, and honestly just mitigate a lot of his offense on the feet. I'm not really expecting it to happen, but I do think that's a potential pathway for Jacoby if he does decide to go there. So I think there's potential upside there on the Jacoby end. So I got to go with Jacoby. I think he gets it done by a unanimous decision, probably 29-28. Moving along, we have Ľudovít Klein versus Devonte Smith, and no odds for this fight yet because Klein is coming in short notice on this fight. So I'll line it in just a second here, but we'll take a look at Smith first. Smith, very explosive striker in there, basically all finishes in all of his wins. He's very light on the feet, does a good job of feinting, does a good job of pumping out the jab. Will mix in the kicks as well, but his best weapons, I believe, are his hands. He's got very quick hands in there, a very quick 1-2. The guy's super accurate in there, and he does seem to have quite a bit of power. However, he is coming off of a knockout loss to Mullarkey, which, I thought was slightly weird. I wasn't expecting Mullarkey to be able to beat him in the stand-up. I thought Mullarkey would have to look to implement the wrestling and the grappling, look to slow Smith down before, eventually getting him out of there. But it looked like maybe the movement and the pace that Mullarkey was putting on Smith was giving him a lot of trouble. Smith had a really hard time getting his offense going, and I think the eventual pace and pressure of Mullarkey eventually got to Smith. And I do think that's going to be a concern on the Smith side. One, maybe his cardio isn't the best, and the chin at this point, he's been knocked out, I think, twice now. So I do think that's a bit of a liability. The guy's definitely dangerous early, but he definitely will fade as the fight progresses, as we've seen. Fortunately for him, he's going to be going up against Ľudovít Klein, who's someone that's a bit plotty in there and not someone who will push a pace because, Klein, he does seem to have a bit of power in there. He's got a very good kicking game. He does a good job of, mixing it up on all three levels. But, again, Klein is not someone who's going to be super active in there. He kind of just plods forward and just looks to set up that head kick, basically. He's got a decent jab and does look to headhunt a bit, but by and large, he does kind of work around that head kick. He has shown a little bit of offensive wrestling, in the Trezano fight, but he's not someone who's very active on top. He was, I think, just hitting some takedowns because it looked like Trezano might have been, hurting him a little bit there. So it looked like he might have just been hitting takedowns to. One, I guess, win on the optics, but more so to kind of just grind out the rest of the round to stall a little bit. I wouldn't really rate him as a great wrestler or anything, but I do think it's something that he has in the bag. But taking a look at this matchup, I do think it's kind of interesting because, I'd consider both of these guys somewhat unreliable. With Smith, I think the cardio and the durability is going to be a bit of an issue. And on the Klein side, I think the output is also going to be an issue for him as well. So, two guys who I think will struggle a bit if it goes to a decision. But if I had to pick a side here, I think I'm on the Devonte Smith side. I think he's a bit better at distance. I think his striking is much cleaner, much sharper, and I think he's got a bit more knockout upside. Klein, I think he's got some power as well, but he's really just looking for that head kick, and if that doesn't land, he does struggle a bit, really getting his offense going. We saw Trezano have a bit of success on the outside. We saw Trezano land that jab, pretty cleanly. And he was more or less touching up Klein, but Trezano not exactly high output either. So, I think if Trezano's out there, being able to land on Klein, I think Devonte Smith will as well. And Trezano looked like some of the shots that he was landing was, stinging Klein for sure. Like, I don't know if Klein was, super hurt or rocked at any point, but it did look like some of the strikes were really getting the attention of Klein. And if Trezano's able to do that, I think that Smith is going to be able to hurt Klein, possibly knock him out, because Smith is a very big puncher, much bigger than Trezano in my opinion. So basically, if Trezano is able to land those shots and have that sort of impact on Klein, I think that Smith would probably have a lot more success with the striking. That said, though, Klein has shown a bit of wrestling, and I do think that if he looks to take this fight to the ground, look to implement some of the wrestling, he could give Devonte Smith some issues because, on the feet, I don't see him posing too many problems for Smith. He doesn't really have the output or the pace to really make Smith work in there in terms of the striking, but he might be able to, if he implements the wrestling, really look to grind on Smith and look to take some heat off of some of those shots. And, maybe if he's able to stick to that game plan, he could slow Smith down enough to potentially win rounds 2 and 3 because we just have not seen Smith do too well, in extended fights. But Klein is going to have to be aggressive with his wrestling. And coming in short notice, I don't know how the cardio is going to stack up. I don't know if he's going to be able to put a wrestling pace on Smith. And at the end of the day, I do think that Smith is a pretty dangerous fighter early. So the official pick for me is going to be Smith, round 1 knockout. How I'd line it, probably Smith around like maybe minus 150. I do favor him quite a bit on the feet, but, there are a lot of concerns on the Smith side, the durability and the cardio. So, if Klein is able to survive that first round, I could see him just start to take over. So, you can't really line Smith as too big of a favorite, but, Klein is coming in short notice, and Smith is a very dangerous finisher. So, I'd line Smith at around like minus 150. I'd probably still wouldn't play the money line, though. I'd probably just play Smith by knockout, maybe round 1 knockout. I think those would be the plays because I think that's going to be most of where his win equity is. It'd be hard to see Smith really win a decision here. Maybe if it's a low-pace striking affair. But I really see Smith getting the finish early or seeing Klein just be able to win a grindy sort of decision. But official pick for me is going to be Smith, round 1 knockout. Moving along, we have Tim Elliott versus Tagir Ulanbekov, and Ulanbekov's the minus 220 favorite. Comeback on Elliott is plus 185. And we'll start with the big favorite in Ulanbekov versus another guy who's a teammate of Khabib's on this card here. The guy's got a very strong wrestling base, very much a control wrestler in there. He's someone that will look to take you down, consolidate control, and look to peel you back down if his opponent's working his way back up. The issue that I do have with Ulanbekov is that he's not really a busy fighter. He's not really aggressive with the ground and pound. He will look for submissions, if the opportunity arises, but he's generally someone who's just more of a grinder in there. Look to really just accumulate that control time and hit takedowns, but overall, just not the most busy fighter. And that's led to some pretty close fights once he does take that step up in competition. We look at that Zalgas fight on the regionals. A lot of people calling it a robbery, but I can kind of see why the judges may have scored it towards Zalgas there. I'm not saying it wasn't a robbery, but Ulanbekov really just was not doing much with the takedowns, and Zalgas was at least like kind of striking off his back. But I guess my point really is, once he takes that step up against fighters who are a little better, he just has a hard time just doing too much other than just getting takedowns and getting control time. Because we even saw in the Bruno Silva fight, we saw in the Alan Nascimento fight, those were really, really close fights. He was a really big favorite in both of those fights, but he just wasn't doing too much. Whereas Silva and Nascimento were able to really scramble and really make him work in there, and it just led to really just kind of sloppy back and forth fight on the ground. So that's really just my my concern with Ulanbekov. He's not a busy enough fighter to warrant such a big price tag in most of these fights. And, he's going to be going up against Tim Elliott, who's a very high-paced, very busy fighter in there. So, with Elliott, he's someone who's got, very unorthodox movement on the feet. He's got lots of movement, lots of output, and a pretty good pace that he keeps up. He's not the heaviest hitter in there at all, but he will constantly look to move, look to work. So it at least gives the illusion of a pretty high work rate, even if he's not landing the most. The guy's pretty solid on the ground as well. He's very crafty on the ground. He's very slippery in scrambles. It's kind of hard to hold him, on the ground. So, this is a pretty interesting fight because I do expect Ulanbekov to look to get this fight to the ground, but we know Tim Elliott's going to be really slippery there. He's going to look to work his way back up, probably keep this fight standing because I do think Elliott is going to be the better striker in there. I think the movement and the looks that Elliott's going to give Ulanbekov might be a little much for Ulanbekov at this stage in his career. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means on the feet, but I do think that if this is a striking affair, we see Tim Elliott just pump out a little more volume and look like the slightly busier fighter on the feet. But, of course, I do expect Ulanbekov to look to shoot takedowns, look to get a bit of control time on Elliott. And at the end of the day, I am going to favor Ulanbekov here because he has shown that he could definitely grind out these decisions, but I think Elliott might be one of the more slippery fighters he's fought, one of the more active and high-paced fighters that he's fought. So I could definitely see Elliott, give Ulanbekov some troubles. So while I am going to pick Ulanbekov here, I really don't mind a stab on Elliott here. He's going to fight for your money. He's going to always bring the fight to his opponent. So, pick his Ulanbekov, but I might put a small bet on Elliott here. Elliott is someone who's going to make the fight scrappy, and I do favor the level of competition, the experience of Elliott quite a bit. It is kind of weird though, right? Because Elliott, he loses to some of the best guys in there, but the guys he's beaten are no longer with the promotion, so there's a pretty big gap there. But I do feel Elliott overall is still a pretty solid fighter. The guy's just an absolute dog in there. He's fighting out of a great camp. And, I don't think Elliott's really shown too much signs of, decline. He is slowing down a little bit, but I do think he still got it. And he can absolutely make this a very close fight. So official pick is Ulanbekov, but I kind of like the Elliott side from a betting perspective. Moving along, we have Umar Nurmagomedov versus Brian Kelleher. And Umar Nurmagomedov is going to be the minus 550 favorite. Comeback on Kelleher is plus 385. And we'll start with the big favorite in Nurmagomedov here. So, the guy's looking like a very promising young prospect, honestly. He's extremely well-rounded. Actually, probably one of the more well-rounded fighters coming out of Khabib's camp. But on the feet, he's actually got pretty good movement. His kicking game is, very good, very diverse there. His striking is actually pretty good, in my opinion. Like, if we were just talking about the striking, I think he'd still be a pretty solid UFC caliber fighter. And, on top of that, the guy's got just very high-level wrestling. Obviously, coming out of that camp. He's very heavy on top. The guy's got very vicious ground and pound. He's shown that, he's got good cardio as well. He's fought 3 hard rounds. He's out there. He's able to push a pretty solid grappling pace. And on top of that, he's throwing question mark kicks, just heavy body kicks. So I think the cardio is solid. He's shown that he can push a pretty solid pace there on the feet and on the mat. So a lot to like about him. I guess the only real knock is the fact that maybe he's a little inexperienced. But even then, I don't think that's like entirely true because, he's fought some really good guys on the regionals. He made his UFC debut against Morozov, who I think is actually a pretty tough opponent. I know Morozov got finished by D'Andrade, but D'Andrade's a solid fighter as well. But what I'm trying to say is he made his debut against a very tough fighter in Morozov and was able to dominate him essentially, right? So I do think that Umar's got a pretty high ceiling here. I think he's a pretty legit prospect. I know there's a lot of guys coming out of Khabib's camp, which, people like to hype up. I believe there's another one on the card as well in Ulanbekov, but I do think that out of all of them, I think Umar's probably the most legit. I do think that Umar's the real deal, and he's going to be going up against Kelleher, who is a very solid, very well-rounded vet. He's got some power on the feet. The guy's got pretty good boxing. He can mix in the wrestling as well. Just a very solid, well-rounded fighter who's able to really fight to his strength and take advantage of his opponent's weaknesses. He's very crafty in there, but he is a bit of a gatekeeper at this point in his career. He's going to be able to go in there and beat guys like Kevin Kroom, Domingo Pilardi, and Ray Rodriguez, guys who aren't really UFC caliber guys, who have holes in their game that he's able to take advantage of. But in this fight, it's going to be tough for him because he's going to be going up against Umar, who I think is definitely UFC caliber and really hasn't shown too many holes in his game either. So the big price tag I think is pretty warranted. Of course, you're going to be paying a bit of a tax on these Russians, especially them training with Khabib. But I think this is a pretty warranted price tag here. I honestly don't see too many paths to victory here for Kelleher. Outside of him maybe just landing a bomb or something on Umar, I don't see him getting him out of there. Maybe he's able to catch him in a guillotine if Umar's getting a little careless there, but I just don't see that really happening. So I think it's Umar all day in this matchup. I'm probably going to look to parlay him up, have him anchor a few of my parlays. But, on the feet, I think that Umar is going to be able to pick Kelleher apart, with the kicks. He's really good at, distance management, and he does seem to kick pretty hard as well. And then, of course, if he does want to, he could just take him down, take Kelleher down and just kind of dominate him there. Kelleher is actually... he's got a sneaky good guillotine, but his takedown defense isn't good. And if he's attacking that guillotine, he's just going to give up a very dominant position if that doesn't convert. So I really like Umar here. I know he's going up against a tough vet in Kelleher, but I think he's able to pass this test here. I think he gets it done. However he wants, honestly. I don't know how, but I think he gets it done pretty dominantly. So yeah, give me Umar Nurmagomedov here. And moving along, we have Marina Moroz versus Mariya Agapova. And this is the grudge match we've actually all been waiting for. Maybe it's just me, but I actually feel the animosity between the two here is a little more legit than the beef in the main event. But in any case, we have Agapova coming in as the minus 210 favorite. Come back on Moroz is plus 180. And we'll start with the underdog in Moroz. So she appears to primarily be a point striker in there. She's pretty good at staying at distance, staying on the outside, just popping the jab, throwing a 1-2, working the leg kicks a little bit. Not the most power in her shots, but she is someone who will throw volume in there. She's constantly working, constantly, throwing something out there, even if it's not doing the most damage. She has shown she could, wrestle offensively a little bit as well, mixing the grappling. She showed that in the Mayra Buena Silva fight, and even in the Sabina Mazo fight. She showed that she'll look to clinch up and even, cage push a bit if she needs to, look to, stall the fight out. So, Moroz, I think, is a very crafty fighter in there. She is kind of savvy with, the optics and stuff. She knows what she needs to do to get the W, even if it's a little boring in there. So I guess it is good to see some of that savvy, but yeah, it just leads to some pretty boring fights. But overall, I think that Moroz is a decent fighter. It's just that she's kind of been pretty inactive lately as well. But she's going to be going up against Agapova, who's a very aggressive striker in there, someone who will move forward and throw heat. Does seem quite strong for the division, definitely does seem to have a few pop in her shots. She's got a number of finishes on the regionals, was able to finish ciphers, and was also able to club and sub Mazo as well after, putting on a very dominant 2-round performance and then finishing her in the third. So Agapova, definitely someone who can crack. Defensively, she struggled with the grappling a bit. She lost to Cortez, got out wrestled, out grappled there, which not a lot of shame in that, because Cortez is definitely one of the better wrestler grapplers in the division. And then we did see in the Dobson fight, there was a good amount of grappling early, which definitely I think contributed to Agapova gassing as well. On top of the fact that, Agapova was throwing some heat early also. But, she showed in the Mazo fight that she can sustain that sort of pace for at least like 2.5 rounds. So I think as long as it's primarily striking, I think that Agapova's got, decent striking cardio. But I do have concerns when it comes to her grappling cardio potentially. But taking a look at this matchup, I do think it's got potential to be a pretty fun fight as long as Moroz doesn't look to implement her grappling right. If it's striking, I do think it's pretty close, but I definitely do edge Agapova. I like the forward pressure of Agapova. I like the strength and the power that she throws in her shot. So I think that the exchanges are going to be pretty even volume-wise, but I think the big difference is going to be, Agapova just landing the much heavier shots, the much more impactful shots. But like I said before, Moroz is someone who can mix in the wrestling and the grappling and just make it a very grindy sort of fight as well. So, I do think that's probably Moroz's best path to victory. I think she's really going to have to look to tie up with Agapova, look to tire her out a little bit and look to just take some steam off of those shots. So, if it's a striking affair, I definitely favor Agapova by a decent margin. I don't think she's going to be blowing Moroz out of the water here, but I do think that on the aggregate, she's going to be coming out ahead, in a lot of those exchanges. But, if Moroz is able to mix in the grappling, I think that she could make it a much closer fight than the line indicates. But at the end of the day here, I'm going to take Agapova. I don't know if the grappling and the wrestling of Moroz is going to be enough to get the job done. I don't know if it's going to be enough to really mitigate the work that Agapova is going to be able to do on the feet, because Agapova is a pretty heavy hitter, and she has shown that she can potentially just match the pace and the output of Moroz as well. So, if they're trading 1-for-1, I definitely favor Agapova in those spots. And on top of that, Agapova is, she's actually got pretty decent footwork in there. I don't know if Moroz is going to be able to repeatedly, take her down or even hold her down for extended periods. So I'm going to go with Agapova here. I like her in this spot. I think she can win a very competitive decision here. So yeah, give me Agapova to win by 29-28 decision. Moving along, we have Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Nick Negumereanu, and Nzechukwu's the -155 favorite. Comeback on Negumereanu is plus 135, and we'll start with the underdog in Negumereanu first, which, if I'm being honest, not really high on the guy. Don't really know what he's good at, honestly. But look, with Negumereanu, he is someone who will just plod forward and just make a fight scrappy. He is somewhat low volume in there, but he does seem to have a bit of power. He does like to load up big on a lot of his shots. For that reason, he is a little slow, in my opinion. But again, he does have big power, and he does seem to have pretty good killer instinct. If he does sense that you're hurt, he's going to look to swarm you. He did that a bit against Kamer, but, Kamer recovered pretty well. And he did that against Villanueva, right? He had Villanueva hurt in there and then was able to just swarm him. So, he does have pretty good killer instinct, pretty good power. But outside of that, I just really don't think he's a particularly great fighter. He's super hittable. Even Kamer, who I don't really rate as a good striker, was able to land at will on Negumereanu. His takedown defense, it hasn't looked good. He's pretty bad off his back. But, overall, Negumereanu, he is a pretty tough guy. He will move forward and will just make a fight very ugly. And he's going to be going up against Nzechukwu, who is a bit of a pressure fighter. He likes to keep his high guard up, walk opponents down and just look to tee off on him against the cage. But the issue with, his style is sometimes he will get back down against aggressive strikers. And, he will just kind of just shell up in there and let them tee off on him, which against better fighters, it's going to get taken advantage of. They're going to look to rip to the body. They're going to start to throw elbows against him like Dawen Jung did, and eventually just get him out of there. But overall, his strikings look pretty sharp. It does seem to have some power. The durability, I think, is maybe a little shaky. He is coming off of a pretty nasty knockout. Granted, he was eating some pretty vicious elbows to the temple. But even before that, he's got wobbled a bit against Olberg. Was able to recover there, but that's 2 fights in a row, I think, where he was on a kind of wobbly legs, and going up against Negumereanu, it could be a little worrisome, especially since Negumereanu does seem to have some power, and if he does sense that Nzechukwu's hurt, he'll start unloading on him. So a little concerning there, but the 2 guys that I had mentioned before I think are much better strikers than Negumereanu. But, taking a look at this matchup, I do like the Kennedy side here. The only thing I really don't like about him is the fact that, he will sometimes just shell up and let his opponents tee off on him. But outside of that, I do favor striking a lot more in this matchup. All around, I just think he's actually the better fighter. But, the better fighter doesn't always win. Sometimes it's the dog in there that wins, right? The guy who's able to move forward, eat shots to land shots that sometimes pull away. But, in this matchup, I do like Kennedy. I really just don't like how sometimes he could be a little too passive in there. But I'm not really sure if Negumereanu's the type of fighter that's going to be able to really capitalize for a couple of reasons. One, Negumereanu, not exactly a power or volume striker in there. He is someone who's going to throw with power, but he will reload, after throwing those heavy shots in there. And when he does, I think that Nzechukwu is going to have opportunities to land some pretty heavy shots of his own. Nzechukwu's got very nice, straight shots in there. And, when he does throw it, I think he's going to be able to snap the head of Negumereanu back. Negumereanu is very hittable, which, brings me to my second point, is that I do think that when Nzechukwu does decide to throw, he's going to be able to just land at will on Negumereanu. So that, combined with the fact that, Negumereanu is a little slower in there, a little plotty, I think that Nzechukwu is going to have a lot of success when he does decide to get his offense going. So I do like Kennedy in this spot. I might bet him small just because, he does have pretty bad fight optics in that, sometimes he'll shell up a little bit, but I do think that once he does get his offense going, he'll be able to land at will on Negumereanu, and he's going to be able to, I think, bust up the face of Negumereanu pretty badly come that second and third round. So give me Nzechukwu here. I think he wins via decision. Negumereanu is pretty tough. I don't know if Nzechukwu is going to get him out of there. So give me Nzechukwu by decision. And in the next fight, we have a potential banger here between Marina Rodriguez and Yan Xiaonan. Rodriguez is the minus 275 favorite. Comeback on Xiaonan is plus 235. And this should be a pretty fun one because we have 2 strikers going at it. But we'll start with the underdog in Yan first. She's very aggressive with her striking. She likes to just move forward and put combinations together. She does seem to have a bit of power as well for the division. And I don't think she's got knockout power per se, but compared to the rest of the division, I do think she hits a bit harder than usual. I mean, all of her wins are by decision, but, you look at some of the fighters she's going up against, I do feel there's a decent strength advantage that she has. She does a decent job of mixing in the kicks as well. She is someone who, will look to counter as well. She's going to bite down and trade in the pocket. And in addition to that, she's shown a bit of offensive wrestling as well. Not much, though, but, just a little bit. She did hit some takedowns and a few trips against Kovalkiewicz. And then I think there was a couple other fights where she was able to get a little bit of top control time, but, she's definitely much more comfortable on the feet. Something to note, though, is she's training out of Team Alpha Male now, so she's definitely going to be getting a lot of looks in terms of the wrestling. That said, though, she did put up a pretty poor showing in her last fight against Esparza. Esparza was able to just take her down, mount her, and pretty much just finish her in the crucifix. So while she is training at Team Alpha Male, her takedown defense still, I think, is something that she needs to work on a little bit, but she has shown some flashes of, offensive wrestling capabilities. But lastly, with Yan, she does seem to have pretty solid cardio, does have, really good output, good work rate over the course of 3 rounds. has shown pretty good durability. Has only been finished, I think, once, and that was in her most recent fight against Esparza. And that's not really even a knock on her durability, because she was, stuck in the crucifix. Wasn't really anything she could do about it. And the refs usually going to stop that, like 99% of the time. But overall, I do think that her durability and cardio checks out, and she is someone who will bite down, move forward, and look to throw down. And she's going to be going up against Rodriguez, who's got very sharp, very crisp boxing. She's got good footwork, pretty good distance management, and she's got really solid output in cardio as well. She showed that she could, fight over the course of 5 rounds and go the distance and maintain a really solid output in both of her 5-round fights. The only thing with Rodriguez is going to be the takedown defense. Similar to Jan, both of them have pretty bad takedown defense, pretty bad get-ups. Once you take them down, you could have a good amount of success just kind of riding them on top and doing a bit of damage there. That said, though, I don't know if it's going to be too likely that either of them are going to look to wrestle or grapple in this fight. I think both are very confident in their striking, and they're probably going to look to try and showcase that a little bit in this fight. But, taking a look at this matchup, pre-tape, I was actually pretty big on the Rodriguez side. I thought she was going to be a potential parlay piece, because I just felt that she's going to be a bit better than Jan in terms of like the technique. On top of that, Rodriguez, I think, is just a bit sharper, a bit crisper in there. And she's going to have the size and the reach advantage also. So I thought all of that was going to be enough to really, help her win pretty decisively. But, after doing a bit of tape, I'm still leaning the Rodriguez side, but maybe not as heavily. The line definitely feels off where it is right now. And, the reason I say that is because Jan is just an absolute dog in there. She's someone who will move forward. She will bite down on the mouthpiece. She will take a few shots in the pocket to land a few counters of her own. In fact, this fight's actually kind of reminding me a little bit of the Weili versus Joanna fight. And, this fight's actually kind of a discount matchup between the two, basically Weili versus Joanna at home, in the sense that, we have a very crisp, technical striker in Rodriguez against someone like Jan, who is more of like a technical brawler in there. And, I could definitely see this fight playing out pretty close, because Jan, she's not afraid to take a few shots in there. And, if that's the case, I could definitely see Jan just barreling forward, eating 2-3 shots in the pocket to land 2 or 3 of her hard shots as well. And that's kind of what happened in the Weili-Joanna fight. And, that was a very close fight. It could have gone either way. I see this potentially happening in this fight, right? Both of them just landing shots on each other. It just being a very back and forth, very fun fight, honestly. So I think it's going to be a pretty close fight. I am still leaning the Rodriguez side. I do favor her striking a little bit more. She's a bit tighter in there. I like the straight punches of hers as opposed to a lot of the looping hooks that Jan likes to throw. But I don't know if Rodriguez is just going to go in there and outclass Jan, because, at this line, it's kind of suggesting that Rodriguez is just going to go in there and dance circles around Jan, and I just don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be a pretty close fight. I would line Rodriguez as a slight favorite in this fight, but, I just don't think that she should be this big of a favorite. So official pick for me is going to be Rodriguez, but I might end up taking a small shot on Jan here, just because I do think that she's going to make this an absolute scrap of a fight. So official pick is Rodriguez, but might look to put a little bit on Jan in the spot. And in the next fight, we have Jalin Turner versus Jamie Mullarkey, and Turner's the -125 favorite. Comeback on Mullarkey is +105. And this is a pretty interesting matchup. I think both guys are pretty evenly matched here. Turner, honestly, for me, has been a little hard to gauge because he's had a pretty weird UFC career, right? Like, he makes his debut against Luque up a division and gets blown out of the water early in that fight. Not really much shame in that. He's, was fighting up a division against Luque, who's a top 5, top 3 guy there. So really no shame there. So he bounces back in his next fight against Callum Potter, who's not really UFC caliber, but he is able to get him out of there early. And then puts on a pretty solid performance against Matt Frevola, who is a solid wrestler, solid grappler. And, he did lose he did lose all 3 rounds, I think, but those were all pretty close rounds. The margins were pretty thin. He did lose because I think he, gave up some takedowns and some control time, but he did have some pretty crucial mistakes in that fight. But overall, I thought it was a pretty close fight. He did beat Culibao, but, Culibao was moving up a division as well. Culibao's, I think, a pretty small 145er also. So, we did see Turner go to the wrestling and grappling that fight and put on a pretty dominant performance, and then goes on to smoke Brock Weaver, who's not really UFC caliber, and then beats Uros Medic as well, who, was, I think, a somewhat hype prospect, but at the end of the day, Medic was someone who's a bit unproven and a little one-dimensional. So, he's had some up and downs in his career. He's fought some good guys. He's fought some, bad fighters in there as well. So hard to gauge just where Turner really is in his career. But as far as what he brings to the table, he's a pretty, sharp striker in there. He's got a great frame for the division. Does seem to have a bit of power as well. The output is good. He seems to have good cardio, shown that, he could hit some offensive takedowns and wrestle a little bit as well. So, he has shown a somewhat well-rounded game and, pretty good striking overall. I think he's also shown pretty solid takedown defense and get-ups. We saw in the Frivola fight, he did a pretty good job stuffing a number of takedowns and working his way back up. But I guess the really only knock I have on him so far is the fact that, he will slow down a bit in these, higher-paced grappling matchups, like in the Frivola fight, right? I think it was the fight he had the lowest output in. But everywhere else, if it's a kickboxing affair, he's going to do pretty well. And, go 3 hard rounds. But I'd say even in the Mullarkey fight, or even in the Frivola fight, even late in the 3rd round, he was still trying to work his way back up, and he was still throwing. So, overall, I think that Turner's a pretty solid fighter. He's still a little early in his career, and he has shown that he's making improvements. So, all in all, I do really like Turner as a fighter. I think he's got a bit of potential. And, he's going to be going up against Mullarkey, who's a very solid, well-rounded fighter as well. He's coming off of 2 knockout wins. Very impressive, right? One against Kama Worthy and the other against Devonte Smith, which, both guys pretty solid strikers in their own right, and he was able to finish both of them. And I was much more impressed in the Devonte Smith performance because, I thought Smith was going to be the better striker in there, and Mullarkey just came in there and was able to beat Smith in the striking department. I thought Mullarkey would have to go to his wrestling a lot in that fight, but he was not only able to hang in the striking department, but was able to get the better of Smith there, which was a little surprising to me and, was honestly kind of impressive on the Mullarkey end. But, Mullarkey is someone who's going to be an absolute dog in there. He's got good striking. He could look to wrestle and grapple as well. The guy's, super tough, super durable. He's got very good heart, and he's got good cardio as well. I mean, overall, the guy's just an absolute dog. He can make any fight just an absolute slog in there. But taking a look at this fight, this should be a pretty fun matchup. Like I said before, both guys pretty evenly matched. But I do think that, there are pretty good comps in terms of, how these guys, match up to each other. I think there's a couple fights for each of them that kind of should shed some light on this matchup. Mainly, I'm talking about the Ziem versus Mullarkey fight and the Frivola versus Turner fight, in the sense that both Ziem and Turner, I'd say, pretty good strikers in there, very tall, very rangy. And we saw Mullarkey struggle a bit with the distance striking of Ziem. And, he was able to take Ziem down a few times, but we did see Ziem actually stuff a good amount of takedowns and actually was able to reverse Mullarkey in a few positions as well. And, I don't rate the defensive grappling of Ziem really all that highly. I think that Turner's actually got better takedown defense and, get-ups than Ziem. So I think that in this matchup, we can see Turner have a lot of success, or at least, similar success as Ziem did. I suspect that, Turner's actually going to be able to do what Ziem did, but better potentially. Whereas, in the Turner Frivola fight, Frivola had a bit of success, taking Turner down, holding him down, but, he didn't get that much control time on Turner. He was able to do enough each round to just be able to swing the rounds that way. But the thing with this fight is I don't know if Mullarkey is going to be able to do what Frivola did, because I think the wrestling and the grappling of Frivola is actually much better than that of Mullarkey's. Mullarkey, I think, is maybe the slightly better striker, and, he's definitely a bit more of a dog in there. But in terms of just, wrestling and jiu-jitsu and grappling and stuff, I think that Frivola is a tad better. And Turner actually did a really good job of, stuffing a lot of the takedowns and working his way back up. So, basically what it boils down to is I think Turner could do what Ziem did, but better, but I don't think that Mullarkey could do what Frivola did any better than him. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I'm on the Turner side here. I like Turner on the feet. I think his striking's a little better. He's going to have the height and the reach advantage. I think he's a little sharper there as well. And I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Mullarkey. I don't know if Mullarkey is going to get enough control time to win the decision here. And, even if he is able to take Turner down, I think Turner's shown a fantastic get-up game. Mullarkey's shown that, he can get reversed by guys who are just not as proficient on the ground as Turner in the ZM. So I think that if that happens, I think we see Turner potentially, be able to reverse positions on Mullarkey. And Mullarkey hasn't actually shown the best takedown defense or bottom game either. So, we could potentially see Turner, get a bit of control time on Mullarkey as well. So overall, I do like Turner in the spot. I'm probably going to bet him. Not to say, he's a lock or anything. I do think that Mullarkey's definitely got a shot here. I really can't hate on anyone taking a shot at Mullarkey, honestly, because Mullarkey is someone who will always fight for your money. The guy's got, phenomenal heart and durability. But I think in this matchup, Turner's just a little bit better. And at the end of the day, I do think that Mullarkey is a bit more of a generalist who is going to be able to capitalize on, certain fighters' weaknesses. Like, if you don't have a great chin, he's going to be able to clip you in there. If you don't have good cardio, he can just outwork you in there. If you don't have a good takedown defense, he could just look to grind you up. But, with Turner, I don't see too many weaknesses from him. So I don't know if there's something or anything that that Mullarkey could really take advantage of in this fight. So I do have Turner here. I have him edging out a pretty close decision, but I do have him winning somewhat clearly here. And moving along into the next fight, we have Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Should be a fun heavyweight bout for as long as it lasts. We have Spivak on one hand, who is going to be the wrestler in this matchup. He's got very solid grappling on his end. He's very aggressive with it and is generally pretty reliable to go there with the wrestling. He's got a good single leg outside trip. He's very heavy on top. Does a good job of using his weight to really control his opponents. The guy's somewhat busy with the ground and pound. He will look for submissions as well. The thing is, though, he's more or less dominated lower level guys with his grappling and a 40-year-old Oleksiejczuk. But outside of the Oleksiejczuk fight, he's more or less just dominated guys who do not have the best takedown defense or defensive grappling. That said, though, he's looked pretty solid in all those fights. But the one thing that just can't be ignored, though, is the fact that he's been knocked out twice already. Once to Walt Harris and the other to Tom Aspinall. And, you can't really knock him too much for those knockouts. The Walt Harris one was his debut fight against Harris, who was a very explosive fighter. And then to Aspinall, who he was fighting on short notice. And Tom Aspinall is looking like a pretty solid prospect. But there are things that can't be ignored, and him being knocked out twice already does leave me with some possible concerns for his chin, especially since he's going to be going up against another powerhouse in Greg Hardy here, who, Hardy's a very dangerous striker, very big power on the feet. The guy's just a super explosive athlete, and on top of that, I actually think Hardy's takedown defense is actually pretty good. He has a decent sprawl. He does a decent job of digging underhooks and has shown pretty good balance in there. The only thing is that Hardy just is a gasser. He really only has about maybe 1.5 good rounds of cardio in there, in high-paced fights. And I do have to say high-paced because he's been to decision twice, once against Volkov, of all people, and the other against, I think, De Castro, where both of those fights were at distance and at a pretty low pace. So, he was able to go the distance in both of those fights. But, usually in these higher-paced fights, like we saw in the Tybura fight, especially where there was a bit of grappling involved, that Hardy just does not have the cardio to really go the distance there. But this is a fight that I definitely do think is going to be pretty high pace, especially, if Spivak decides to attack the wrestling early. However, I do feel that Hardy is going to be pretty dangerous in that first round. The guy's got a lot of power. He's going to have quite a bit of size on Spivak as well. He's going to have the height and the reach advantage. On top of that, he's just going to be the much more muscular guy, the much more physical guy in there. So, I do think that early in the fight, we could see Hardy potentially just land a very heavy shot on Spivak, potentially get him out of there early. But as the fight wears on, I do favor Spivak a little bit more, especially if Spivak is able to get his grappling going. That said, though, I do think that's a pretty big if, because we saw in one of Spivak's fights against Tybura, Tybura wasn't really able to get the wrestling going until, I think, like in the later part of the second round, and Hardy was actually tuning up Tybura for most of that first round and was doing okay for the first part of that second round before he got taken down. But I think that first round is going to be real tough for Tybura. We've seen Tybura hurt. We've seen him get cracked before, and Hardy is someone who can bring that power and that aggression early. So, Tybura, he's really going to have to weather that storm early. But, if he does get it, if he is able to and is able to start hitting takedowns come that, second and third round, I do think he could potentially get Hardy out of there. So, pretty tough fight to call in the sense that, whoever wins might end up looking like a pretty big favorite, because if Hardy just goes in there and blasts Spivak, he'll look like a big favorite. Or, if he just gasses out and we see Spivak, take over and just pound him out later in the fight, Spivak could look like a big favorite here. But my official pick for this is Hardy by round 1 knockout. I just think that Hardy's the superior athlete in there. And, I really do think that Spivak, he's going to be struggling a little bit, closing the distance, getting in on the hips of Hardy and really working that wrestling early. He's going to have a hard time taking him down, and I do think that Hardy is probably going to find the chin of Spivak early. So I'm going to go with Hardy to get the knockout. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get it done in there and we see Spivak start to pour it on come the second and third round and, get a TKO finish if he is able to get Hardy to the ground. But another look I really like for this fight is going to be the under or fight doesn't go, because like I said before, either Hardy just blasts him early or we see the asthma kick in and Spivak start to take over as the cardio of Hardy starts to dip. So I kind of like the fight does not go. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty juiced, but I do feel this is a fight that's likely not going to see the scorecards. And I know I did get burned in that last heavyweight fight, between Porter and Badeau. Thought that fight wasn't going to go, but I think the circumstances are a little different. I think Hardy's cardio is a big liability, probably far worse than Badeau's, especially if Spivak decides to grapple. And, Spivak, I think, is a legit heavyweight, despite being a little smaller on the heavyweight end. I do think that he is a bit more of a heavyweight than someone like Porter. So, that combined with the fact that he's usually going to look to push a grappling pace in there, combined with the fact that Hardy does slow in these high-paced fights, I think that he's either going to be live for an early finish or, get finished later in the fight. So the official pick for me is going to be Hardy round 1 knockout, but I really do like the fight doesn't go. Moving along, we have Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira, and Holland's going to be the minus 250 favorite. Come back on Oliveira is plus 210, and this is a pretty interesting matchup here. We get to see Holland make his debut at 170, so a few questions that I'd like to see answered on his end, but we'll start with Oliveira first, a staple in this division. A veteran at this point, very well-rounded in there. He's got pretty heavy hands on the feet. He's got a nasty body and leg kick. His output can be a little low, and he is someone who does swing big, though, so that's kind of expected. He does have a pretty solid grappling game as well. He's really strong in the clinch. He's got a solid submission game. The cardio is a little questionable, and you can also say maybe his heart as well. We've seen him kind of just check out a bit in fights, and overall, I do think that Oliveira is a somewhat inconsistent fighter, and lately he just has not looked particularly great. I think he is on a bit of a decline. The guy's, I think, definitely slowing down a little bit, and so that combined with the fact that he's been historically a pretty unreliable and inconsistent fighter makes me a little hesitant to be on the Cowboy side here. But he's going up against Kevin Holland, who definitely does have a few concerns on his end as well, mainly the takedown defense and the get-ups. The guy got exposed pretty badly against Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori. I think he spent like a good 40-45 minutes combined in both of those fights. Honestly, just a pretty embarrassing performance overall. But he's moving down to 170 now. Maybe the takedown defense holds up a little better here against guys who aren't quite as big, because Brunson and Vettori are pretty big middleweights, and Holland is someone who's stated that he's not someone that cuts a ton of weight. So him moving down to 170 could potentially be a good move for him. He's definitely going to have the size on a lot of guys here. I mean, his frame. He had a lot of size on guys who were even at middleweight, but he just doesn't have that much muscle mass. So moving down to 170 could be a good move, but it does remain to be seen here. But I do feel this is a somewhat favorable matchup for him. He's getting I'd say a step down in competition against a much smaller opponent in Oliveira. Oliveira, he has shown some grappling, but he isn't someone that attacks it aggressively, and it might be harder for someone like Oliveira to take down a big guy like Holland at 170. But as far as what Holland brings to the table, I think we all kind of know, he's a very sharp, dynamic striker in there, does a great job of mixing it up. Holland's got a very nice, diverse attack, and he does also a pretty good job of fighting off his back foot as well. So, on the feet, I definitely do favor Holland here. I think he's going to be a little sharper, a little quicker. I do think that Oliveira is starting to slow down a little bit. He's taken a lot more damage recently. We see guys like Bryce being able to land clean on him. Even Randy Brown, who was able to clip him pretty early in the fight, I think. So, I do think that Cowboy Oliveira is slowing down a little bit, and someone like Kevin Holland can definitely capitalize. The concern, obviously, for me on the Holland side is going to be, how's his cut down to 170 going to be? How is he going to look? If it's affected potentially his durability or even his cardio at all, because Holland is actually coming off of technically a submission loss, but he got rocked pretty bad against Daukaus in that fight. It was a headbutt, but if I remember correctly, he was actually out, and it was him falling onto the canvas that was what kind of woke him up a bit again. So just a couple minor concerns in that regard for his weight cut down to 170. So not sure how that's going to turn out for him. But I guess the other thing is going to be the cardio as well. Kevin Holland, I believe, is someone who doesn't have great cardio. He is someone who will start to slow down, especially in more grueling, high-paced sort of fights. We saw it a bit in the Brendan Allen fight, and even in the Darren Stewart fight. He had, first two rounds looked really solid, and then ended the last round on his back. Did not look good there. And then, of course, we have the Brunson and Vettori fight. So, I don't think the cardio of Holland is great. And, moving down to 170, I don't know how that's going to affect him. But, fortunately for him, he's going up against Oliveira, who's got pretty similar issues. Oliveira, I don't think has got great cardio, and Oliveira is someone who will also look for a way out if he's, starting to face a bit of adversity in there. So I do think that, matchup wise, this is, I think, a nice matchup for Oliveira to really get warm in the 170 division. But as far as how the fight is going to play out, I like Kevin Holland here. I think he gets the early knockout. I think it's going to be pretty similar to the Randy Brown, Alex Oliveira fight. Brown and Holland both, very tall, rangy strikers with really good precision, very good accuracy. And, I think it plays out pretty similarly to that fight. I think we see Holland eventually just clip Oliveira at some point early in the fight. I think Oliveira, he might have a bit of success, kicking the legs of Holland. He might even try to look to wrestle a little bit, seeing how some of Holland's other fights played out. But I don't know if he's going to have too much success there. I think Holland eventually is able to get his reads in. He's able to get the timing down and just be able to find the chin of Oliveira. And once he lands that clean shot, I think Oliveira is just gonna shell up, and we're gonna see a TKO stoppage on Holland's end. So yeah, I like Kevin Holland in this spot, and I like him to get the first round knockout. And in the next fight, we have Edson Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell, and Mitchell's the minus 150 favorite. Come back on. Barboza is plus 130, so should be a very fun matchup here. Very fun stylistic matchup. We have Mitchell the grappler versus Barboza the striker here, and we'll take a look at Barboza first. So he's a veteran striker, very nasty striking game, very good kicking game as well. The thing is, he is getting a little older, but he still has looked pretty sharp in there. He's coming off of a knockout loss to Chikadze, but not a terrible loss in my opinion. Chikadze looked like just the much quicker, sharper guy in there. But before that, he was coming off of a pretty competitive fight with Burgos, a fight that he had actually won in the third round, knockout. And so, I don't think Barboza's on like a massive decline or anything, but I do think he's on a bit of a decline, just not like not too bad. I don't think I think he's still got it. He just won't be able to hang with maybe some of the better strikers in the division like Chikadze, but this shouldn't be too big of an issue here. Barboza is going to be up against Mitchell, who is he's a grappler. The striking of Mitchell isn't bad actually, but compared to someone like Barboza, who's been doing it his whole life, it's still a level or two behind. And Barboza might be getting a little older, but I do think that his striking is still going to be better than Michał at this point. Barboza does have pretty solid takedown defense as well. However, he has struggled a bit versus very dominant wrestlers like like Khabib, obviously, and Kevin Lee, which, you do have to kind of give him a little pass for, right? This was at 155 against guys like Khabib, who a lot consider the GOAT, and then Kevin Lee, who just put on an absolute career performance against Barboza in that fight. And, Kevin Lee's a massive lightweight as well, whereas Barboza, I'd say, was maybe just a little undersized at lightweight. So there was a pretty big size discrepancy in that fight, whereas now Barboza at featherweight, Barboza is actually a pretty big featherweight in my opinion, and he's going to be bigger than Bryce Michał in this matchup. And Barboza did show pretty good anti-grappling against the likes of Amir Khani. At 145, was able to defend a lot of the takedowns, was able to keep it standing the majority of the fight and win on the feet there. But, I don't think that Amir Khani's really that good of a fighter. He's not someone who will aggressively pursue the wrestling or the grappling, at least not like Bryce Michał. Mitchell's a very solid wrestler, very good grappler, and he's very aggressive with it, right? So you can expect Michał to look to get this fight to the ground ASAP, not want to keep this fight standing for any longer than it needs to be. Because on the mat, Mitchell's a very slick submission grappler. He does have that twister on his record against Matt Sales, and he was able to dominate Rosa on the mat before it was cool, the first guy to really just hold Rosa there. Not only that, he had Rosa in some pretty deep submission attempts. But I think the fight that really stood out to me was going to be his fight against Andre Fili, where he was just very aggressive with the wrestling that fight, was nonstop looking to grapple. The striking looked solid as well, actually. I think he was actually getting the better of Fili until Fili landed that jump knee. But even then, Michał showed really good awareness and was able to continue to fight through the adversity after getting rocked at that point. But, he showed really good cardio, really good aggressiveness there, was looking to chain together takedowns and just get the fight into the grappling department where he was most comfortable. But this is definitely going to be a big step up in competition for Michał here. Barboza's going to be hands down the best striker that Michał has ever fought. And there's also going to be just a massive experience advantage on Barboza's end. Because I was saying earlier, so Barboza's the best striker that Michał's fought, but Mitchell's hardly the best grappler that Barboza's gone up against. But on the feet, I do favor Barboza by a pretty wide margin. I think that if this is just a stand-up kickboxing affair, I think we see Barboza just absolutely tune up Michał there. Even an older Barboza, I think, is going to be able to piece up Michał on the feet. But I actually kind of like Michał here in this spot because I think that, Michał, he fights well to his strengths. He's got good fight IQ in there. He's not going to look to stand and trade with Barboza. I expect Michał to go in there and really look to implement the wrestling and the grappling. I don't think we're going to see too much striking coming from Michał in this fight here. And while I don't think that Mitchell's quite on the level of wrestling as guys like Lee and Nurmagomedov, we do have to consider the fact that Barboza got absolutely dominated in those fights. And, I'm not exactly expecting a dominant performance from Michał here, but I do think that he's going to be able to work the wrestling and the grappling enough to do enough to win on the cards here. Because at this stage in both of their careers, I got to trust the younger, more tenacious fighter in Michał here. Mitchell's shown tremendous heart and durability and cardio. So, I'm going to trust him to be able to enact a grapple, wrestle-heavy game plan over the course of 3 rounds and really mitigate the striking of Barboza here. So, the pick for me is going to be Michał. I think he wins a pretty close decision here. I really don't see him running away with it, but I do trust him to just grit it out like he did against Fili and just be able to win, a close 29-28 decision. And in the co-main event, we have the rebooking of Rafael Dos Anjos RDA versus Rafael Fiziev. And I'm pretty glad that they have been able to keep this fight together because I think this is going to be a very fun fight, a very intriguing matchup between the two. Fiziev is going to be the he's going to be the minus 240 favorite. Comeback on Dos Anjos is plus 200. So we'll start with Dos Anjos first. The guy's just a legend of the sport. He's super game to fight. Very commendable. He's only fought like just elite competition in his past 12, 13 fights, and some of those fights were at welterweight as well. So the guy's just had a very impressive career so far. The guy's a very high-level grappler. He's very slick on the ground. His wrestling is, really good. His stand-up is, pretty damn serviceable as well. The guy's got some knockout power. It's been a while since he's gotten a knockout, but, he's been fighting a lot of welterweights, so you can't really blame him. And, the guy's got phenomenal cardio in there. He's super tough. He's only been knocked out twice in over, 40-plus fights. So, overall, the guy's just a very good fighter, very good athlete in there. But, the issue is obviously going to be the fact that he's nearing the tail end of his career. He's well past his prime. I don't think he's on a massive decline or anything, but his best days are definitely behind him. At 37 with the wear and tear and the amount of fights he's gotten in, the cliff is around the corner, and I'm not saying he's going to, fall off a cliff for this fight, but that is something I think you have to be wary of, especially since he's going to be going up against a very explosive, very technical striker in Fiziev. And for RDA, this will probably be the most dangerous striker that he's gone up against in a while now, because if you just kind of go through RDA's record so far, he hasn't really fought like a super dangerous striker recently. I mean, yeah, he's fought Paul Felder, and, Felder was actually having a really good first round against him, but, you do have to remember that this is a Felder who came in short notice, who was training for a marathon and is basically a retired fighter at that point. He'll still step in once in a while to maybe take some fun fights, he said, but had really no intention of staying active. So I really can't rate that win too highly, and I can't read too much into it, aside from the fact that I saw Paul Felder actually land some pretty clean shots early while he was fresh, but eventually the cardio of RDA took over against a short notice Felder. But take a look at the rest of his record. Before that, Michael Chiesa, mainly a grappler. Leon Edwards, basically, a coaster, not someone's going to look to finish. Kevin Lee, who he beat, but Kevin Lee's also a wrestler. Kamaru Usman, who's gotten some knockout power now, but this was back when Usman was still just very much a grindy decisionator. And then before that, Covington, same deal, a high-paced wrestler, decisionator. And then Robbie Lawler, who is probably going to be the best striker he's fought in recent memory. And that was over 4 years ago against Lawler, who was also on a bit of a decline as well. So overall, I think RDA is a really good fighter still, but there's just quite a few question marks in regards to this matchup. And he's going to be going up against Fiziev, who is, I think, a very dangerous striker, in the prime of his career. Fiziev, very high-level striker in there, very quick hands, very sharp. The guy's got phenomenal timing and accuracy. The kicking game is solid in there. Just very good offensive striking overall. His takedown defense has checked out so far, but, one thing to note, he hasn't really faced a very aggressive grappler or a very high-level grappler at that. Moicano was, I think, supposed to be that guy, but Moicano was content to just stand and bang in there and eventually got knocked out. Would like to have seen Moicano test the grappling and the submission defense of Fiziev, but unfortunately we did not see any of that play out. And there are some other concerns for me in this fight on the Fiziev side, one being that this will be his first 5-rounder, I believe. So, the guy did slow down a bit against Bobby Green in that 3rd round, and you do have to wonder how he's going to look if this fight does hit the 4th and the 5th round. On top of that, there's just going to be a massive experience advantage for RDA. RDA's been in there with some of the best guys. He's shown that he could grapple with some of the best guys. He could grapple with some of the welterweights as well. So, I definitely favor that on RDA's side. But, of course, Fiziev's going to have the youth advantage. He's going to be much quicker, maybe the heavier hitter in there. And I low-key suspect that maybe the weight cut might be a bit of an issue for RDA. He looked fine against Felder, but, that was a bit over a year ago now. And part of the reason RDA moved up was, the weight cut was really killing him, but he's just fighting much bigger guys in there. And, at 37, cutting down to 155 is probably pretty tough for him at this stage in his career. And he's going to have to be able to put on a pace against someone like Fiziev. So I think the weight cut might be a potential factor in influencing maybe the cardio and maybe even the chin of RDA now at 155. So something to consider here. So, I think there's just a lot of variables in this fight. So a little hard for me to call in that regards, but if I had to pick a side here, I'm going to go with Fiziev. I got to go with the much younger, quicker, sharper striker in there. The degenerate in me kind of wants to parlay Fiziev up, but there's just far too many unanswered questions on the Fiziev end. One, how's his cardio going to look extended in the 4th and 5th rounds? And how his takedown defense and bottom game is going to look against a very high-level wrestler and grappler in RDA. So I'm most likely going to pass on this. I do want to see how RDA or how Fiziev looks against someone like RDA, because for all we know, Fiziev might just have a terrible bottom game, and we see RDA just go out there, take him down, and submit him. Just far too many question marks there to be laying this sort of juice on him. I do think that betting-wise, RDA is probably the value side here. He's just much more proven. He does have a path to victory and potentially the wrestling and the grappling, but at the end of the day, my gut feeling is that we see Fiziev pull through here. The much more explosive striker, the younger guy in there. So, official pick for me is Fiziev. Round 2 knockout, actually. I know RDA's been pretty tough generally, but it's been a while since he's fought a very explosive striker, and I kind of have a weird feeling, maybe his chin's going to get cracked here. We see maybe the weight cut have a bit of an effect on him, and someone who hits as heavy and as hard as Fiziev might be able to eventually find the chin. So I'm going to go with Fiziev here to get that 2nd round knockout. And in the main event, we have the grudge match between Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. And I'll be honest here, I'm one of those people. I don't know if I'm 100% buying into the animosity here. I do feel there is maybe a bit of disdain on the Masvidal end. Maybe got blindsided a little bit here, but I don't think there's any deep running hatred or anything. I think they hug it out, honestly, at the end. But regardless, let's take a look at the betting lines here. Covington's the minus 350 favorite. Coming back on Masvidal is plus 285. And we'll start with Masvidal first. So I think we kind of know the deal with him. The guy's a very slick boxer in there. He's got great counterpunching, does a good job of just putting combinations together. Very good timing on his shots, definitely can crack as well. He's very good defensively and has shown pretty good durability. I know he's coming off of highlight reel knockout against Usman, but I do feel that's a bit of an anomaly. He got a little careless in there. Probably didn't really respect the striking of Usman. Felt that he was maybe just the better striker in there, and honestly just got a little careless and he got caught. But historically, he's very good defensively and has shown good durability. Although, coming off of a nasty knockout like that, you do have to wonder how his chin's going to hold up moving forward. But this is probably one of the less dangerous matchups because Covington's not exactly a big puncher. So I think it should be fine on the feet for Masvidal. His takedown defense is actually, pretty solid, and he does actually do a pretty good job of working his way back up. We even saw, in the Usman fight, he was, pretty good at, working his way back up before he eventually got finished. But, historically, I think he's shown pretty good takedown defense and get-ups. I think you'd have to go all the way back to the Henderson fight to see him really get worked in the wrestling, outside of the Usman fight. And of course, he did lose to Mariya as well, but, he did keep those fights pretty close. Both of those were split decisions, and, he was able to keep it standing for a good chunk of the fight against Henderson and, do a bit of work on the feet, but it just was not enough. But overall, Masvidal, he's a pretty solid fighter, but, I hate to say this, but he is honestly a bit of a journeyman, and Colby's definitely made sure to mention it in all of his interviews, but I do feel there's some truth in it. Masvidal, while he is a very slick boxer, with a good skill set, he does seem to fall short a bit anytime he takes that step up in competition. And I'm definitely not counting him out in this matchup because, I do think that he's got some potential paths here, but it's going to be a real tough order here because he's going up against a Covington who I think is an elite fighter, honestly. He's really only struggled against Usman, really, and Usman's, I'd say, an elite fighter as well. So really unfortunate for him. But, Covington, obviously he's got, phenomenal wrestling. The guy's got high-level cardio. He does a really good job of fighting to his strengths. He's not going to look to just stand and box in there with you unless you're Usman, but he's someone who will generally look to just spam like 10 plus takedowns in a fight. He will look to chain wrestle. He's not going to just, stop after the first attempt in there. And he has shown that he can go 5 hard rounds, pushing a very high wrestling heavy pace in there. And on top of that, he's shown really good durability and, really good heart. He's only been finished once against Usman, and even then, he wasn't out cold. He was hurt pretty badly, but his facilities were still there. He was on that single, as he'd like to say, working his way back up. And even in the second fight, he was rock bad and hurt, and he still continued to fight through it. And you do have to remember, this is the same Usman that knocked Masvidal out cold. And, we saw Covington be able to tough it out in the second fight. And, even in the first fight, he was able to eat some pretty nasty shots for 5 rounds before finally getting finished, late in that fifth. But overall, with everything Covington brings, his cardio, his pace, his wrestling, his durability, and his heart, I think is just a recipe for a winning fighter, honestly. And with everything I've said, you guys probably already know which side I'm on. It's going to be Colby Covington. I think the wrestling and the pace that he's going to be able to put on Masvidal is just going to be too much. We maybe see Masvidal have a bit of success on the feet, early in the fight, maybe in the first round and a half, maybe part of the second round, but I do think that once Colby's starting to get that wrestling going, put that pace on Masvidal, I think that he's going to have a harder time getting his strikes in. He's going to start to slow down a bit as well, and I just see Covington being able to smother him come the third, fourth, and fifth round with the wrestling. And I do want to go back to the Benson Henderson fight for Masvidal, because I do think it does shed a bit of light on this matchup here. Henderson is a solid wrestler in his own right, but, he just does not bring that sort of pace and pressure that Covington does. And that was a fight that was, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. So, we saw a prime Masvidal go up against a very good wrestler in Henderson, and Henderson was able to edge him out. But, Covington's, I think, going to be able to hit a lot more takedowns. He's going to be able to get a bit more control time and just have much higher work rate against Masvidal. And, this is going to be against a Masvidal who's 37 years old at this point, a bit past his prime. Maybe his takedown defense and get-ups has improved since then, but he'll also be a much older fighter against a younger Covington who is a bit closer to his prime. But again, I don't want to completely count Masvidal out here. It's just I don't see too many viable paths to victory here for him. He's going to either have to catch Covington early with, some flying knee again, or just catch him coming in, but I really struggle to see him winning outside of that. Maybe if his takedown defense is super on point, he's able to work his way back up and outstrike Covington. He might have a chance, but I just don't see it. We haven't really seen that sort of game from Masvidal. I don't think he's going to be able to really match the cardio of Covington here. For that to happen, I think we'd have to see basically the best version of Masvidal ever. Whereas I think for Covington to win, I think he just more or less just have to show up, basically. Covington, hitting 7+ takedowns, getting 15+ minutes of control time, landing, 100+ significant strikes is just another day in the office for Covington. So yeah, I think Covington gets it done here. I really like him to win by decision. I don't know if he's getting the finish. Masvidal has shown pretty good durability, and Covington just really has not shown crazy killer instinct in there either. So yeah, give me a Covington by decision. I'll probably look to just parlay the money line as well. I know it's starting to get a little out of hand, but I just struggle to see too many paths to victory here for Masvidal, outside of an early finish. So give me Covington by unanimous decision.